I'm not sure if you followed St. Paul's logic in the first reading today. I think I can see him in my mind pacing back and forth as someone is madly trying to write down everything that he's saying. He's saying, if Christ is preached as risen from the dead, how can some of you say there's no resurrection? If there's no resurrection, then Christ isn't risen from the dead. And so then our faith is in vain. Going on and on and on, back and forth. Basically what he's saying is our faith is not some sort of a fable or legend. If our faith is only about, well, Jesus spiritually raised from the dead, or it's a good idea that we have Jesus risen from the dead, if our faith is about, for instance, just a good moral code or something like that, then our faith is in vain. Our faith is in vain. But rather, Jesus is risen from the dead. It is not some sort of a story that we tell to make ourselves feel good. It is not some sort of a fable or legend or myth. If it is, then we're the most pitiable of people. It doesn't help us. In fact, it destroys us. It's based on reality that Jesus conquered death. You know, we get this postmodern kind of sense in our hearts where, in the world we say, well, they didn't really know, and so they would believe that maybe Jesus was risen from the dead, even though he really wasn't. No. They knew dead was dead. They knew dead was dead, even more than we do. It was a common experience of their lives, much more than it is with us who try to hide death behind all these nice euphemisms and try not to encounter it at all. They knew dead was dead. And if someone was raised from the dead, that changed everything. That changed the whole universe. In fact, when St. Paul went to Athens and he started preaching, he started by this whole long philosophical exhortation to the Athenians, who were philosophers at the Areopagus, and he's talking about your tomb of the your shrine of the unknown God, and he's trying to draw them into the God of Israel and all this stuff, and then he says, and Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, and a whole bunch of them just laugh, like, what? That's just you're foolish. Dead is dead. And St. Paul says, if our faith is not based on Jesus risen from the dead, what is the purpose? In our culture, and I see this a lot of times when people come for baptism, I ask, well, why do you want to have your child baptized? And, sometimes we get some good answers, and sometimes it's where they're at is, well, I want them to grow up with the same morality I did. Well, you don't need to be Catholic to hold a moral code. There are lots of non-Catholics who hold a moral code. If all our faith is a moral code about this is right and this is wrong, do this and don't do that, we've lost everything. We're the most pitiable of people. If all it is a moral code, then what is that about? If I'm okay and you're okay, that makes no sense. But Jesus came on a rescue mission because all of us are radically broken and far from Almighty God. And so he says, I want to draw you in. And I have conquered death. Not as some sort of a philosophical idea, not as a theological understanding, but in reality. I have conquered death. When you look at all the commercials and stuff on TV, it's all about trying to avoid death. Use this skin cream and you will be young. Yeah, you're going to make you happy. What basically says, so you don't have to deal with death. If you have this product or this other thing, so we won't have to deal with the fact that we are mortal. And we're all going to end, as one of my friends puts it, as worm food. But to recognize Christ really came to destroy sin and death. And if Christ is risen from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep, then our faith is everything, the whole of reality. May we recognize this incredible gift. May it always be in the forefront of our minds that Christ is risen from the dead, and that everything else that we seek after, everything else that we grasp at is only a wisp, smoke in the breeze compared to the reality that Jesus was raised from the dead and has destroyed sin and death.